The Vice President of the Beef Improvement Federation. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you are newcomers? How many of you, this is your first Beef Improvement Federation conference? All right. So about 2/3 of the audience. So, well, we want to welcome you, and that's kind of the idea of this Young Producer Symposium, is to get you introduced to each other and allow you to mingle and participate, and obviously an interesting program, and also give you a little background on what the Beef Improvement Federation is. This organization started in 1968. I wasn't attending at age 2, but it's been around for quite a while. And from the onset, the organization was dedicated to advancing and coordinating all segments of the beef industry. From the start, BIF sought to connect science to industry to improve beef cattle genetics. I like to say that when you think about this meeting, this BIF meeting, the who that's here is a unique combination of people, because we have the industry, seed stock breeders, commercial cow-calf breeders, allied industry, breed associations. Then we have extension, those that are tasked with taking the science out to the producers in the industry and explaining things to us. And then also the fundamental researchers are here, the guys that actually grind out the hard science. And so it's a pretty interesting group of attendees, and I think it's a meeting where you can be challenged on a number of different levels. I think personally, I'd say it's probably the most intellectually challenging meeting you'll attend, because you'll go to one of these meetings and you'll walk in and there'll be a bunch of those formulas up there that you haven't seen since that class you didn't like in college. So, which is not very long ago for many of you, but is certainly for those of us that are speaking today is quite a ways back. And so it is interesting that way, and of course visiting with people out in the hallways is exciting. And the thing I tell you about these BIF meetings, having attended now for almost 30 years, is that everybody here is eager to visit and to exchange ideas. That's kind of the common denominator of this meeting. And so I would challenge you, especially the younger portion of our audience and the first-time attenders, I would challenge you to take advantage of that. I know that that's daunting, I know that that's intimidating, but you know, as you see many of the people that you maybe heard of in the industry or looked up to or were interested in talking to, they're going to be walking down the hallway, and what an opportunity to visit with them and engage. And so we certainly encourage you to do that during this meeting. It's a great opportunity. Now we've lined up some great speakers for you here today. We've got Kevin Ochsner here, and Kevin's going to start us off with a talk about the road to the future in the beef cattle industry. Then we've got Dr. Mark Allen from Transova, and Mark is going to talk to us about how advanced reproductive technologies are changing our industry. And finally, we're going to wrap up with the art and the science of trust by Richard Fagerlin. So we've got a great set of speakers, and at the end we'll have a panel Q&A session. So sure, jot down your questions as you go and be ready to engage with them when we reach the end of the presentation. So with no further ado, I'll invite up Kevin. If you watch Cattleman to Cattleman on NCBA, you see Kevin on there. He's a great spokesman for our industry, was awarded the Ambassador Award for the industry last year at the Beef Improvement Federation, and we're lucky to have him today. Thanks for coming, Kevin.
Thank you for your invitation, and welcome to Colorado. Colorado, of course, is my home state. I'm very proud of this state, and you know what? If you, depending on where you live in Colorado, if you bring rain like you did to my place last night, we might have this meeting here a little more often. But if you bring hail like you did to Lee's place, this may be the last time you're invited to Colorado. Is that right? I am pleased to be here. So many times when I go around the country working with clients and so forth, I have to jump in an airplane, and this is one of the times that I drove 35 miles away from home. And so it was quite nice to get over here this afternoon. And not only that, but I had a little experience last week that some of you who travel a fair bit can appreciate. I've traveled for, I guess, about 30 years now, including my national officer year and so forth, and spent a lot of time in airports and don't typically get very stirred up about that. But last week, I had a unique experience. And to completely understand where I was coming from, the insurance agent came out and met with Julie and I about a week ago. and was doing his annual evaluation. He told me that based on my age and the number of kids that I have yet to get through college, that I was about $100,000 short of life insurance. And so he talked us into buying another term life insurance policy. Didn't think much about it and ran off the airport that next day. And before I jumped on the airplane, I decided to grab something there at the airport. I went through Panda Express, got me my little combination 2 plate, and they give you a nice little fortune cookie with that and so forth. And I stuck that in my briefcase and was running off to the airplane, got on the airplane, and reached into my briefcase, pulled out the fortune cookie, and the fortune cookie said, an investment you've recently made is about to pay off. And so I want to tell you, I just about, Joe Massey, jumped off that airplane and called the good folks in Illinois and said that I had a terrible case of the flu. But we made it there and back, and here's what I would tell you. An investment you've made in coming to this meeting will absolutely pay off. I want to begin by underscoring what Lee just said. The people you meet, the insights you gain, the knowledge you learn, I promise you, you are going to take that back to your own operations and make hay with that. So I want to compliment you for carving out time, for writing a check, and for being here for the next couple of days, and hope you have a great time. Real quickly, by way of introduction, I do wear several hats. I consider my most important responsibility that being a husband and father to about 3 kids, one of which we just celebrated the 21st birthday last night. I also, as Lee mentioned, served as host of Cattleman and Cattleman for about the last 10 years. What many people in the cattle industry don't realize is for the last 27 years, I've worked in the agribusiness consulting industry. And to fully understand kind of the background of that, I tell people that I grew up just north of here in Fort Collins, Colorado, on an irrigated farm and registered cattle operation. My dad and grandpa bought a farm in 1977. My grandpa died of cancer in 1979. The 1980s hit, and as I say, the rest, as they say, is history. By the time I graduated from Colorado State, there wasn't a home farm to come home to. So that took my career path in a little different course. After college, I went to work for an agribusiness consulting firm in Indianapolis called Agribusiness Group. Worked there for 21 years, and for the last, 5 or 6 years, have had my own consulting firm called Agcellerate. And so most of the last 27 years, quite honestly, on a Monday to Friday basis, have been spent in agribusiness consulting. I've had a deep passion for the cattle industry, and we dug back into the cattle business. We had my brother and I had about 25 head of cows left as 4-H, leftover 4-H and FFA projects. And in 2005, my wife and I decided to, when we moved back here to Colorado, I guess we moved back in 1998, bought a place, and in 2005 we decided to ramp that up a bit, and got in a satellite arrangement with Wolf Cattle Company in Morris, Minnesota. We're a satellite cooperator herd for the wolves. My wife also runs a local branded beef business of ours. So we've kind of backed into this, and as we talk about, young producers, I think one of the things I want to talk through today is all of us have different resources and backgrounds, and we need to think how we put those resources and backgrounds together into a strategy that works for us, because there's no one strategy that is going to be appropriate for each one of you based on your backgrounds and resources. I have had the privilege, and count it a deep privilege, to work with a number of great companies over the last 27 years. And I showed this slide just to give you a smattering of some of those to represent it's not just in the beef industry. I had an opportunity to be in Illinois last week with a Case IH dealer. If you want to talk about a tough business right now, try to dive into the agricultural implement business about right now. They're facing their own unique challenges. I've worked in the food space. Burco is a food safety company right here based in Colorado. Worked with a number of agricultural organizations, both livestock and otherwise. But I will tell you that the beef business is in my blood, and I tell people that, believe it or not, the name Ochsner means raiser of cattle. They say it originated from either one as stubborn as an ox, or B, one who kept or sold oxen. Now, I prefer to think of it the latter, but I think if you talk to my wife, she would say it was the former. It had nothing to do with what we own, everything to do with our bullheadedness. I got personally involved in the cattle business. My dad gave me, this goes back to Lee Leachman. I don't even know if Lee knows the story. My dad had a registered Angus heifer out of Anconian President, believe it or not. And when I was 2 years old, he gave me a 2-year-old heifer out of Anconian President. I sold her calves until I was 9 years old, bought 4 half-blood Limousine cows for $275 a piece. And that next January, I purchased this heifer. She was a 75% Limousine female at the National Western Stock Show that next January. 40 years later, my daughter, and with the help of this young man right here that I think clipped on him a little bit that night, showed this bull to Supreme Championship at the Nebraska Cattleman's Classic. He traces his pedigree 7 generations back in 40 years to that red cow. And so those of you involved in the purebred cattle business, I tell people one thing. I don't guarantee you we always make them better, but we do change them. All right? We can change them. And in this case, I think we made them better. So my question today is, yes, I am passionate about the beef business. But where is the road to the future leading us in the beef industry? And, fundamentally, those of you in the seed stock sector, I would ask this. Where does the future lead us? Does the road ahead look like this? Is it black pavement, blue skies, and smooth sailing? Does it look like this? Is this picturesque pastoral setting that looks like a very relaxing afternoon? Or does it look like this? Is it a little foggy and hazy about just where this road is going? I tend to think, as I think about the future of the beef industry, it may look more like this. There's some twists and turns that we have to navigate, folks. And I love the quote from the race car driver. He says, straight roads are for fast cars, turns are for fast drivers. I think there's a lot of value in that statement for us in the beef industry. There was a time a couple of years ago, low cattle supplies, right? That, if you just had fast cars, cattle that lived and gained, if you just owned cattle and didn't have to disperse them in a drought, you're going to make money. I think we're in a time period, and will be for some time, it's going to take some fast drivers to navigate the twists and the turns in the road. And so I like this comment that has been shared before, that a bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the turn. Doing a session for a group of cow-calf people up in North Powder, Oregon. Some of you, anybody Oregon from folks in here? There's a place up there called Farewell Bend. And I wanted to stop and ask just why it was named Farewell Bend. But it's one of those corners. And so my point is, can we make the turn of the road? I look outside our industry to some pretty good thought leaders, and I ask ourselves the question. Bill Gates said it this way: IBM was more dominant than any company will ever be in technology, and yet they missed a few key turns in the road. That makes you wake up every day thinking, let's try to make sure today's not the day we miss a key turn in the road. Let's find out what's going on, and let's make decisions to chart our destiny. Here's what Bill Gates talked about. When the internet came along, he said they had it as the 5th or 6th top priority. He said, now it wasn't like I didn't have it on my list. I said, we've got it on our list, so we should be okay. But he said, there came a point in time when things were changing much quicker than we thought. It was having a much deeper impact on our business than we anticipated, and we had to create a sense of urgency. He said we went on some retreats and had some meetings, and he said eventually a new strategy coalesced, and we decided what our strategy was going to be. He said that's going to happen in all businesses every 4 or 5 years. You got to allow for a lot of dissent and discussion. He said you have to recognize the right strategy, and then you have to put a lot of resources behind it. And I think Bill Gates can speak to the beef cattle industry today. Because in my opinion, as we think about the turns that we have to navigate in the road to the future, the fundamental question is, let's make sure we're not missing one of those turns. Let's make sure we're both anticipating and have our hands on the steering wheel ready to make those course corrections. I think we can learn from those people who did miss a turn in the road. How many of you had parents that bought you some Encyclopedia Britannicas when you were kids? Some of you may be too young for that. I did, exactly. You and I both did, right? Nice volume set, right? 1768 was when Encyclopedia Britannica started. They had a long, proud history. They peaked in 1990 with 100,000 sets of encyclopedias sold. By 1994, Microsoft came out with Encarta. You know what they were saying? They said that's an inferior product. I mean, everybody knows we are the fount of all wisdom. I mean, we are Encyclopedia Britannica. Anybody serious about real knowledge will buy our encyclopedias as opposed to this $50 add-on with Microsoft Encarta. Wrong answer. They got their lunches eaten, and by 1996, 3,000 Encyclopedia Britannicas were sold. The world changed around them, and they weren't ready to address that change. They would rather deny that anything was happening, delay decisions, and ultimately die because the fact of the matter is, 2012, they announced the last printed editions of Encyclopedia Britannica. How about this one? Kodak? Anybody remember Kodak moment? 1976, Kodak had a 90% share of cameras, film, and film processing. They dominated the market. What many people don't realize, back in 1975 I should say, they were the first to invest in digital technology. Why did they embrace digital technology? Because it was going to cannibalize their business. Heaven forbid that we invest and actually promote digital technology, because frankly, we make a lot of money selling film and getting film processed and selling paper, right? You know the rest of the story. They went bankrupt. They went close to going bankrupt. They sold their patents for over $500 million and avoided bankruptcy by the skin of their teeth. And this one, has anybody ever leased a movie from Blockbuster? Can you find them anymore? Let me give you a history there. 2005, Blockbuster had 22,725 stores across the United States. Represented a 74% market share in home entertainment. By 2010, 9,900 stores, 29% market share. 2013, closed their last store, went bankrupt. Interestingly, in 2000, Reed Hastings, the guy who started Netflix, offered to sell Blockbuster Netflix for $50 million. He said, "Get out of my office." Here's what I'm asking you all as meat producers. What does the camera industry, the entertainment industry, the knowledge industry have to do with our industry? Industries all around us are being disrupted. I spent lots of years consulting with Monsanto and watched and helped that organization transform crop agriculture. Some people like Monsanto, some people hate them, but you cannot argue with the fact that they fundamentally changed how we grow and what we grow and where we grow it. It's going to happen to the beef industry too. It is happening. So here's the question that I want to stimulate your thinking about today. What are some of the curves in the road that we have to navigate? I think there are 5 that come to my mind. Changing consumer preferences, global demand opportunities, some of the competitive threats that we have to wrestle with in our business, production and management technologies, and ultimately resource management decisions. And if I had time, I'd spend a lot of time on each one of these. I'm just going to kind of salt your thinking a little bit. And here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I believe that if you're going to be a breeder and a raiser of livestock, you have to begin with a point of view. You have to begin with a baseline set of assumptions about what the world's going to look like 5 and 8 and 10 years down the road. How are people going to be consuming our products? What products are going to be consumed? What resources are we going to have to put into our products? Who's going to be measuring and assessing how well we're using those resources? And I promise you, your point of view about the future will absolutely drive how you mate, breed, feed, and market livestock. I'm not smart enough, but I guarantee that a lot of people in this room, one of them sitting right down over here, one of the more visionary people in our industry, Lee Leachman. There are a lot of people in the halls of this conference that you can pick their brains and say, where's this thing headed? What's it going to look like? What do I need to be doing? I mean, should I be more focused on maternal traits, or should I be more focused on carcass traits? How big a deal is feed efficiency going to be? How about animal welfare? Do you know that 50% of the traits that the chicken industry selects on right now are based on animal welfare traits? How about health traits? Look at the dairy industry, the progress they've made. See, what you believe about our ability to use or not use antibiotics has a lot to do with how you're breeding and managing cattle, as an example. So let's talk about a couple of these, and I'm going to go very, very quickly. Changing consumer preferences. Highlight a couple of comments. 28% of households in the United States comprise just one person. What does that mean in terms of portion size? In terms of how we package it? One pot meals are up 22%. Shoot, pot's up more than 22% here in Colorado. I promise you. Can you edit that out? I'm sorry about that. I just did just a one marijuana joke about Colorado. That's not the state I grew up in, I promise you. But seriously, people are wanting easy dishes, right? More than half of all Americans, 57%, eat a burger once a week. 1 in 3 residents got to be Hispanic. I think that's good news for the beef industry. Hispanics tend to have large families they like. They're meat eaters. Annual eatings per capita of snack food. Have you seen the propagation of beef jerky and beef snacks? Going to grow 12% by 2024. People are snacking instead of eating, aren't they? Recent study indicated, that I just read out of, I think it was University of Arizona, one of the Arizona universities, said that consumers are willing to pay $3.07 more per pound for steak labeled natural and no growth hormones. Now, we could have a long discussion this afternoon about how many people know what natural means and whether or not growth hormones are good or bad. I tend to believe in the technology, but I believe even more fervently that I want to give people what they want to buy. This out of the Meat Place magazine. Conventional meat enjoyed an annual sales growth of 4.6% from 2011 to 2015. Natural products went up 14.6%, and organic shot up 44%. How about another comment that I think is going to fundamentally rock our world? Who bought Whole Foods this year? Amazon. Percentage of shoppers who said they at least occasionally buy grocery-type items online clocked in at 38%, up from just 19% 3 years ago. Furthermore, 15% of shoppers said they already buy meat and poultry products online at least sometimes, up from 3% in 2015. How many of you are Amazon Prime members? Let me see your hand. How easy is it to get stuff on Amazon Prime? I want to tell you, this will reshape the beef industry and the food industry in general. Changing consumer preferences. We talk a lot about millennials. How many millennials in this room? Hopefully we have some. This is a Young Producers Conference. Those of you born from 1982 to 2000, representing 26% of the population, 44% have posted a photo of food or drinks. How many of you done that? Our grandparents laugh at us. Why don't you just sit down and eat it instead of taking a picture of it? 76% say they like to cook. Do you remember a time in our industry we said, woe is me, we need a microwavable roast because nobody wants to cook. We have a whole generation that like to cook and they want to get better at it. And guess what? 54% would rather go to a food festival than a music festival. This is good news for us. People are proud of their cooking skills. They like having people over and entertaining people. They want to learn how to barbecue and cook new things. Let's talk about the second thing that I think is driving and that we have to navigate. My goodness. Can't open a newspaper today, right, without talking about global trade. Scares the dickens out of me what we're doing right now. I didn't make it to the International Meat Congress, but I know my friend Kate did with the Cattleman crew. A lot of great speakers down there. You and I both know that if we're going to grow meat demand, it's got to be outside our borders. We've got to focus on these 78 million people we're adding, the growth in the global GDP, and the fact that here in the States, we might add 14 million people, but China's going to add 116 million people. Look at that graphic and just show what that means, right? The wealthiest 10% of Chinese represent more than just the entire population of Japan. Right now, we're not in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Can't seem to get a bilateral done with Japan. President Trump announced another, asked Lighthizer to identify another $200 billion worth of goods that we can tax. We can put a tariff on from a Chinese standpoint. I'm not a global trade expert, and I didn't stay at the Holiday Inn Express last night. All right. But what I do fundamentally believe is we in agriculture will live or die by trade. And I hope that the powers that be have a grand plan, because I do believe this is going to be something we will navigate and need to navigate. Not only is it trade policy, and I'll talk a little bit about this later. We've got to have the product people want. And whether that be how we're raising that product or how we're identifying that product. If you want to fire me up, talk to me about animal identification. Talk to me about the fact that the United States and India are the only two countries that you can't really identify livestock throughout the supply chain. And if we want to be global players in this business, this is my belief and my belief only. We've got to figure that one out. I think a third element that we're going to have to navigate is our competitive threats. And here's my question. Are these your competitors? We come to meetings like this. And we like to look across breeds and say, boy, if we could just get a little piece of the Charolais action there, boy, the Herefords are sure popular. I wonder how they're doing it. And my goodness, if we could turn ours black and get some of the Angus pie. And I mean, on and on and on. We want to, and I get the fact that somebody's going to buy a bull, and maybe from your ranch or the ranch 50 miles away. But in my estimation, these are our competitors. In the beef industry, here's what's cool. Protein is cool today. Read a report a week ago that said, roll back the clock 8 or 10 years ago, we were interested as a society in losing weight. Today, we're interested in becoming fit. It's less about weight and more about fitness. And guess what is a key component of fitness? Nutrition. And the key component of nutrition is what? Protein. Now, we have a lot of people fighting for protein. Have some yogurt. I was frustrated a couple years ago. Chobani used a cowboy on a fence. Eating these Chobani yogurt. I'm going, they're using our brand recognition to promote their stinking yogurt. How does this work? Right? Lots of interest in nuts, cashews and almonds and all sorts of things, right? The burger that TGI Fridays is serving in hundreds of their restaurants across the country, the Beyond Burger. Chicken, pork. We'll talk a little bit more about this in just a minute, the test tube beef, if you will, fake meat, whatever you want to call it. And let's not forget other competitive beef producers like Australia that says we have all 5, and guess what one of those 5s are? 100-day shelf life, full traceability. They're coming at us, and they have been coming at us. Here's what I would call the latest competitive threats, and if you've not taken a look at this article, it was the front page this fall of Inc. magazine. It was titled "A World Without Slaughter." Okay? And a couple of comments on this. This was the Beyond Meat advertisement. It said, "We believe there's a better way to feed the planet. Our mission is to create mass market solutions that perfectly replace animal protein with plant protein. We're dedicated to improving human health, positively impacting climate change, conserving natural resources, and respecting animal welfare. At Beyond Meat, we want to make the world a better place, and we're starting one delicious meat at a time." And then this from the Inc. magazine and Memphis Meats. "Overcrowded pigs and poultry farms are reservoirs for global pandemics. Animals raised in them are pumped full of antibiotics, spurring the rise of drug-resistant superbugs. Meat is an ongoing environmental and public health catastrophe. Livestock account for 14.5% of greenhouse gas production. In 20 years, I think people will look at growing and killing an animal as bizarre." We can thumb our nose at this and say, nobody will ever eat it. Or we can get busy thinking about how we're going to compete against it and how we're going to frame the discussion and the war that's ahead as opposed to allowing them. That starts July 12th, Washington, D.C. with a hearing about what FDA will agree and not agree to be called meat. Talk to the milk folks. You don't have almond milk. But what did they position it as originally, right? Had to go to court to change that. Well, one comment that I was going to make before I leave this comment. I know there are those, and this is extraordinarily frustrating to me. They are positioning this as clean meat. So what you do is dirty, and what they do in the laboratory is clean. And that seems very counter to the discussion we've had for a number of years about GMOs, because anything that we were doing in a laboratory was dirty and environmental catastrophe and public health safety risk. But this is a fantastic opportunity to create a great tasting protein in a much more environmentally friendly way, supposedly. We've got our work cut out for us here. I think another area that we have to think about that will absolutely shape it, and I'm anxious to hear our next speaker, because this is one of the guys that has brought some great technology, he and his organization, and has forgotten more than many of us will know about reproductive technologies. But reproductive technologies is only one of them that I think we're going to have an opportunity to manage. Whether you're talking about gene editing, and I've been in lots of strategic planning sessions with breed associations and others talking about what does that mean to the future of cattle breeders like many of you who are sitting in this room. If I don't need your entire bull, I really just need 1 or 2 genes out of him. That becomes a very different environment, doesn't it? And what is the public acceptance or non-acceptance of that? I don't know. Right? We have lots of, but I guarantee you there are people in this room and in this conference that know that. Drones and what that means, just one of the technologies that we can use. Spent a lot of time talking about antibiotic stewardship. I tell people, I want my son to be able to treat a sick animal and that treatment be successful. And that requires all of us in the livestock industry, but frankly, all of us in the medical profession and all consumers to be responsible and judicious in our use of antibiotics. And I'm willing to raise my hand. I want to tell you, count me as one of the worst ones. I will tell you that not long ago, okay, within the last 5 years, I would look at a calf, I'd see a down ear, and I'd reach for a bottle of Draxxin. And I guarantee you, my family knows today, nothing gets a shot without an attempt first. We are much more careful. We've got a lot more to learn, but I want to tell you, even in my operation, I consider myself somewhat educated, but I always thought I just knew more. That calf's sick, he needs a doctor. And I'm doing a lot better job today than I was 5 years ago, I want to tell you, in saying, okay, so do we know what our first treatment protocol is? Do we know when we're going to doctor and when we're not going to doctor? All right? And I think the same goes for consumers. You come home with strep throat, feeling better after 5 days of treatment, bank those other pills in hopes that you'd have some to get started the next time you're sick and can't get in the doctor, you're part of the problem too. Animal ID, I've talked about that, but I want to tell you guys, this is an area we cannot, as U.S. beef industry, continue to put our heads in the sand on this issue and say things like, well, who's going to pay for it? And who's going to know how many head I have? This is core and central to not only disease protection of the entire U.S. beef cattle herd, and you would have thought we would have understood that with BSE, but it's core and central to our ability to market around the globe. And the last thing, how many of you have one of these? This is first calf heifer of my daughter's a couple years ago. Any of you have these blue calls? Anybody? A couple years ago, I'll give you the story. This is a November heifer my daughter showed all summer long, and in Austin, we got her fatter than we needed to by summer. Amazing that with a show heifer, right? Fat show heifer, it's hard to believe. She was November born, she was going to calve in October. She was due to calve while we were gone to the National FFA Convention. It was my wife, myself, 2 daughters were going to be gone to the National FFA Convention. I said, just as sure as we leave, she's going to lay down. She shouldn't, based on what got her bred to, but she's going to lay down, she's going to have a 110-pound calf, and her entire uterus is going to be sitting out behind her, and my daughter's going to be in tears, and when Grandpa comes over and says your heifer's dead, and the calf's dead, and everything else, right? And so I called a buddy because I'd heard about this technology at the World Dairy Expo. An outfit out of Ireland has this technology called blue calls. You put this device on a cow's tail, and when she goes into labor and starts swinging that tail a little bit, you get a text message on your phone. Actually, you set it up for a call, so it goes, ooh, so seriously, you're laying in bed, and it moves at you, and it says, high cow activity, last 45 minutes, or last 30 minutes, or whatever. Now, I don't think this is very priced in a way that is very commercially feasible for your 2,000 acre, or 2,000 head cow-calf operation, but the reason I use this example is I think there is lots of technology that is going to get cheaper and more accessible for lots of us to make our business. I would tell you that the crop farmers and the hog farmers and the dairy farmers have been able to utilize technology to scale their operations a lot better than we in the beef cattle industry. And I do think some of those technologies are going to come to us. As it relates to management and production technologies, I think a big part of that is also talking to consumers about what we do. This is a group of about 15 McDonald's executives that came out to our house, I guess it was not last spring, but the spring before. And they toured our place, they toured JBS 5 Rivers, and they toured Cargill Meat Plant. These were Vice President of Menus, Vice President of Marketing. These are people from Oak Brook that frankly, very, very bright people. But most had never been on a cattle operation of any sort, let alone seeing cattle actually knocked and killed. And I tip my hat to actually those people at those high levels saying we want to see how our beef is produced. They had lots of good questions, not only of us, but the folks at the feed yard. And I think it is our responsibility to talk about what we're doing and why we're doing it. I showed them what we're doing. I said, from a processing a baby calf standpoint. And I told them how much this bottle of antibiotics costs. And I tried to help them understand that I want a healthy animal. I want to do everything I can from a colostrum standpoint, from a calving standpoint. I want to do everything I can. But I also talked to them about some of the weather patterns we were having that spring. And the fact is that calves are going to get sick, just like first grade kids are going to get sick. And so we do have to do a better job talking to people about that. The last turn I think we have to manage and navigate is this turn around resource management decisions. And I do think this has a whole lot to do with all of us, in the seed stock business as well as commercial industry. We do, and we are stewards of lots of resources. And increasingly, people are asking the question, what are you doing to be a better steward of that? Right? McDonald's came out and said that they were going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 36% by 2030. JBS spent $300 million on sustainability efforts, identified a 20% reduction in greenhouse gas, wanted 10% improvement in water use efficiency. I want to tell you, whether you like the word sustainability or not, we are, in this room's generation, going to have to do a lot more to measure, to monitor, and improve how we utilize our resources. And I think that has a lot to do with the kind and type of cattle we breed and raise. I think it's exciting. I wanted to share with you a little excerpt from a magazine my kids brought home from school. This is Kersey, Colorado, Platte Valley. We live the school is 1 mile from the largest feed yard in the world, 100,000 head feed yard out there, the original Montford lot, or one of the original Montford lots. It's called Choices, and it's a sandwich with bugs crawling out of it, and it says, would you eat this sandwich? I want to read for you a couple of comments of that. Right now, producing our protein-packed staples like poultry and cattle takes a tremendous amount of water, land, and energy, largely because raising animals also means growing the food they consume. A telling stat. The grain-fed livestock in the U.S. could feed nearly 800 million people directly. It goes on to say, yet it takes just 1 gallon of water and 2 bags of feed to produce a pound of cricket meat, as opposed to 2,000 gallons and 25 bags for a pound of beef. Insects are animals and taste like animals. So Ty, just think about how easy chores would be if you were feeding a bunch of insects instead of all those cows. You and your dad might want to think about that. It goes on to have all these pictures on the right, and let me share with you a couple of the things that it shares. It says, in a family of 4, if a family of 4 skips red meat 1 day a week, it's like taking your car off the road for 3 months. Goes on to say that, making just 1/4 pound hamburger uses enough water to shower for the next 2.5 months. Guys, I'm not going to give a speech on sustainability and so forth, but if this is what kids in Kersey, America, or I guarantee it's happening in St. Louis, in Denver, and all over the country. We've got to demonstrate what we're doing there, and we've got to be willing to show that we are making demonstrable progress. So let me tee this up. Now that I've shared some of the terms that I think we have to navigate, I think navigating those terms requires us to ask the right questions. And in 27 years of consulting, I fundamentally believe that asking the right questions is critical. The book I read a number of years ago says this: catch up, you need to ask the right questions. Get ahead, you need to find the right answers to the right questions. To stay ahead, you need the right answers, the right questions, at the right time. And you and I both know timing is everything. Albert Einstein himself said, if I were given an hour to save the planet, I'd spend 59 minutes defining the problem and 1 minute resolving it. Let me give you an example.
Das hier ist ein Mindset. Das hier ist das wichtigste Gerät des Küstenwächters. Das Gerät des Überlebens. Ja.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard. What are you thinking about?
So with a name like Ochsner, I can make fun of my kin, okay? So I don't want any comments about the political correctness of my jokes. What are you thinking about? Here's my question. What are the fundamental questions? And here are 5 that I want to stimulate you with. And I really hope you'll take these 5 to heart and use the next couple of days talking to some very bright and capable people that have made a huge impact in the beef industry. spends that time that Lee was talking about in the hallways to bend some ears of some people and try to formulate some answers to these questions of your own. What is your desired destination? How do you develop your roadmap? What is your unique value proposition? Who are you going to have as your traveling partners? And finally, what is your most important priority? Real quickly. It's been said, and you know it, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And fundamentally, I think we've got to ask the question, what markets and customers are you trying to serve? For some reason, those of us in the beef cattle industry have been, I think, very guilty of trying to be all things to all people. We want our cattle to be great maternal cattle and great terminal cattle and great show cattle and great... We want to be great at everything. Take one look at the hog industry or the chicken industry and figure out what they've done. Talk to my friends in the plant breeding world and tell me if they use, if they really do think hybrid corn works. If they identify ways to selectively identify those traits and not try to make the same, not try to have a homozygous corn plant that has good stock strength, dry down, yield potential altogether. They use multiple lines to make that happen. I love the show industry. Mr. Biesmeyer knows that. I believe it's a great way to raise kids. Our kids have learned a lot of good lessons on it. But I also think that in many cases it's not a great picture of reality. And I know there are some people who do a great job. I know in our business, there's a lot of times that one of two things will happen. You'll have a third or fourth place heifer that'll make a good cow. Right? Or increasingly, what I've done over time is said, okay, that's our little set of show cattle that we're trying to make some show heifers out of and take junior national, and the rest of them we're doing our deal with to kind of, at least in my case, we're trying to serve a very specific market for the wolf family. And I do think that sooner or later we have to figure out what is your destination, because it's just hard to do everything with one set of cattle. Second question I want to challenge you with. Have you developed your roadmap? I do a lot of strategy sessions with a lot of different organizations. And I use this slide often. I love this quote. Strategy is about earning the right to win. A right to win is the ability to engage in any competitive market with a better than even chance of success. Not just in the short term, but consistently. You earn it by making a series of pragmatic choices that align your most distinctive and important capabilities with the way you approach your chosen customers and with a discipline to offer only the products and services that fit. That's a mouthful. But here's what I'd say. In my opinion, strategy is about, I tell the companies I work with, always play fair, but avoid fair fights. Always fight fair, but avoid fair fights. And this is what I mean. There's no immorality or ethical element of that. What I'm saying is, try to position yourself in business to go into a fight where you have a competitive advantage that your competitor can't quite match. In a lot of companies that I've consulted with, we compete against some of the big consulting houses. But one thing that I've leaned on for a long time is I said, you'll spend 3 weeks trying to teach that person about agriculture. I've got 27 years of understanding you and your customers. Figure out what that differential advantage is for you. And then it is about choices. I don't know about you, maybe some of you have more resources than I do. But I found the cattle business is a resource-hungry business. When you talk about the livestock, the equipment, the amount of feed, the amount of land, I don't have enough money to buy all the equipment I want, all the great herd bulls I want, all the land I want. So guess what you have to do? You got to make choices. And strategy is about making those trade-off decisions about what you will and won't do. So here's the question. How are you going to compete and win in your market? What does that mean in terms of cattle you're breeding and raising? What customers are you focused on serving? Are you going for the all-natural market? Are you going for the grass-fed market? Are you trying to be a lead show calf producer? Don't hear me wrong. I was talking to somebody the other day, sold 50 head of show calves, averaged $5,000 right off the cow. I'm never going to fuss about that. Sounds like a pretty good business model to me. But that's his market, and he's figured it out. And he's not trying to sell commercial bulls to somebody. Third thing, what is your unique value proposition? It's very similar to the strategy question I asked. There are a lot of people trying to raise cattle. Everybody likes raising cattle. People raise 15 head, 20 head. What makes you unique and different? I tell people in the strategy work that I do, differentiation is about two things. Either performing different activities or performing similar activities in different ways. How many of you have taken an Uber anywhere? Pretty nice, aren't they? The story behind Uber is kind of interesting because right now we have about 4% of the kilometers driven worldwide that is their market share. They believe ride hailing will grow to 25% by 2020 or 2030. In Chicago, let me read you this statistic. The number of riders hailing cabs has plummeted from 2.3 million a month to 1.1 million a month. San Francisco Yellow Cab filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Here's my point. They're both transporting people from point A to point B. Some of you are trying to sell herd bulls, some of you are trying to sell replacement heifers, some of you are trying to sell feeder calves. You're all doing a lot of the same thing, but my question is, how are you going to do it differently? Is it about the genetics you have? When my dad had his first bull sale in 1979, I think it was all about the pie. People talked about the pie. You know, went to that bull sale, and that was some delicious pie. Well, here's my belief. People who are buying bulls today want more than delicious pie, don't they, Lee? And so the question is, what are you going to do for them? Are you buying their calves back? Do you have them in some sort of a system where you're getting them better discounts off some of the inputs that they're purchasing? Are you educating them and informing them? What's making you different? The next one that I will identify is, and I think this is critical. I learned this the hard way because my dad got into a partnership that ended very poorly. And I think you have to be awful careful about who you choose to make the journey with. Norman Pate from Wyoming, one of the privileges I have in my role as Cattleman host is I have a chance to MC the Environmental Stewardship Awards every year at NCBA. And the Pat Ranch was one of them that won that award. And Norman used this quote. He said, "We move through vast fields of opportunity on a road built by our own choices, interests, and talents. It's the gift of the journey and how you choose to travel that forms the essence and purpose of life." That was pretty good guidance. Mr. Schultz from Starbucks fame said, "We're not in the coffee business serving people. We're in the people business serving coffee." And if you're in the cattle business, I would argue the same is true for you. I see a man in the back of the room that I think a lot of. You talk about who you choose to take the journey with. 1987, went to Youth Beef Industry Congress as president of the North American Junior Limousine Association. Met a kid that was president of the American Seminole Association. Somehow, some way, we were designated or volunteered ourselves to do Sunday morning vesper service. I jumped in an airplane from Omaha, Nebraska that later that day, traveled to Alexandria, Virginia for my orientation as National FFA officer. There I met, for the first extended period of time, Kelly Evans, who was our national president from Nebraska. We drew straws to figure out who was going to speak at what state FFA convention. She got Texas. I said, "Kelly, when you go to Texas for the state convention, you're going to have to look up a kid just met. He's president of the Seminole Association. He's running for state president." I said, it would surprise me if he wasn't state president. Well, I told her to look him up, not marry him. But Donald Brown and Kelly Evans were married several years after that, right? But that is one of the friendships that I will tell you has extended for 30-some years now. And this is the unique thing about the cattle business and about the seed stock industry particularly. I challenge you, choose carefully who you want to take this journey with. The last thing I want to talk to you about is priorities. And when I talk to you about this, I'm talking to myself because this is what I struggle with most in life. I like a lot of things. Okay? I have trouble. It is easier for me to say no to the bad things than it is to say no to some good things that aren't quite as good. Does that make sense? And I think anybody in business we got to figure out how to prioritize. I like this comment. When everything feels urgent and important, everything seems equal. We become active and busy, but this doesn't actually move us any closer to success. Activity is often unrelated to productivity, and busyness rarely takes care of business. Steve Jobs says he's more proud of the things they said no to than the things they said yes to. If you want to be a good business person, if you want to be a good cattle breeder, prioritization and focus are critically important. Would you agree? You got to figure out what's most important in your breeding program. You got to figure out what's most important in your business. And then you got to prioritize those things and make sure you put the rocks in the jar first, because guess what? There's a lot of sand trying to get in the jar. And if you let the sand get in the jar first, the big rocks, the most important things in life, are going to fall over the sides. So I want to challenge you. The one thing we can do is say, walk home from this conference and say, what are my top 3 most important priorities? What's most important to us? Where do we have to take action? And that leads me to my closing thoughts. Years ago, Fortune magazine came out with an article that I use in my strategy sessions a lot. It goes like this: nothing is more difficult and therefore more precious than to be able to decide, Napoleon said. The Frenchmen definitely made some major calls, like invading Russia. Now that was a decision, a big cold decision, 1,000 miles long with no food, bad clothes, a lot of unfriendly locals. And you see what Napoleon was talking about. Some decisions leave you wearing an emperor's crown, while others leave you in pajamas on elbow. It's horrifying, really. If there's one thing we humans abhor, it's uncertainty. The Romans dealt with it by worshiping Fortuna, goddess of randomness. The Persians had another approach, which Herodotus recorded around 430 BC. If an important decision is to be made, they discuss the question when they are drunk. The following day, the master of the house submits their decision for reconsideration when they're sober. If they approve it, it's adopted. If not, it's abandoned. Conversely, any decision they made when they're sober is reconsidered afterwards when they're drunk. They were mysterious, the ancients, or maybe just loaded. For modern decided folks, business is a bad hiding place. Strategies, careers, and companies, they're all made of decisions the way glass is made of sand. And the hardest ones roll uphill. A leader's decision, it's been said, is a leader's role, it's been said, is make decisions that can't be delegated. So my question for you is, recognize that our decisions drive our destiny. The decision about the herd bull we use, the decision that you made to come to this conference as opposed to doing something else, the decision you made to buy a new trailer instead of investing in some technology, some genetic testing technology, let's say. Those are all trade-off decisions that we make that have long-term ramifications. Some good, some not so good. Watch this.
When your cable's on the fritz, you get frustrated. When you get frustrated, your daughter imitates. When your daughter imitates, she gets thrown out of school. When she gets thrown out of school, she meets undesirables. When she meets undesirables, she ties the knot with undesirables. And when she ties the knot with undesirables, you get a grandson with a dog collar. Don't have a grandson with a dog collar. Get rid of cable and upgrade to DirecTV. Call 1-800-DirecTV.
My apologies to anybody with grandsons and dog collars. That is fine. But here's my point. Our decisions and actions do have consequences. And so the final comment I'd make is this. Warren Bennis in Old Ticky wrote a great book called Judgment. And those of us who have livestock judging backgrounds can really appreciate this. He said, with good judgment, little else matters. Without good judgment, nothing else matters. He said, good leaders sort the important from the trivial. They focus on getting the important calls right. So as I close today, my belief about business and about cattle business is this. We've got to take a look at the landscape. We've got to anticipate the curves. We've got to develop a point of view about what we believe about the future, because I believe our assumptions and point of view drive our decisions if we're logical people. And then we've got to be able to take a look at all the decisions we could make, all the options and opportunities. And we've got to focus on the right decision, the most important decisions, and make the right calls on those decisions. At the end of the day, as I look back over my life thus far, I think my life can be summarized in 4 or 5 key decisions in my life. All the rest is pretty incidental. So figure out what those key decisions are for you. and focus on getting those calls right. Thank you for having me. Lee.